Max that was spinning and I had to go to the right of him. I had a good turn one and I was in a good position, and then the only way I could go was right, and so then I lost positions from there, and then obviously I think it was Franco that hit me, and I lost a lot of performance from there.
How is it possible that Lewis Hamilton finishes a race without understanding absolutely anything of what happened to his own car? And what is Ferrari really hiding behind this crisis? Because what happened after the 2026 Miami GP was not a simple bad race. It was a statement that set off all the alarms within the paddock. A 7-time world champion, completely out of it, admitting that the car just wasn't right. And the most serious thing, he has no idea why. And if Hamilton doesn't understand it, then the big question is, does Ferrari really know what's going on? Or are we facing a much deeper problem that could sink their entire season? What we saw at Miami 2026 cannot be understood if we do not take a few steps back and analyze the entire context that surrounded Lewis Hamilton before even getting into the car that weekend. Because the story does not begin on Sunday, it begins much earlier with a Ferrari that was already showing worrying signs that at the time seemed isolated, but that now fit together like pieces of a much more disturbing puzzle. Hamilton arrived in Miami with a clear expectation. This was the turning point. Ferrari brought its largest package of updates of the entire season, an evolution that, in theory, should close the gap with the leading teams and return them to the real fight. There was optimism within the team, there was confidence in the simulator data, and above all, there was a feeling that the worst was behind us. But that narrative began to break down from the first moment the car hit the track. And this is where the first key element of this act appears. The total disconnection between what Ferrari thought it had and what it really had. Because Hamilton makes it clear from the start of the weekend. He didn't know what to expect. And that, in Formula One, is a very dangerous sign. A driver of his level needs references. He needs to feel that the car responds to logic, that there is a base on which to build performance. But in Miami, that base simply didn't exist. As the sessions progressed, far from finding answers, what appeared was more confusion. The car did not react as expected. The improvements did not deliver the promised leap, and most worryingly, the performance was inconsistent. It wasn't a clear problem that they could attack. It was a general feeling that something was not working, but without knowing exactly what. This connects directly with something that Hamilton had already revealed days before, and that, at that time, did not have the impact it should have. The team had been competing with a brutal loss of performance without understanding its origin. We are talking about up to 9/10 on the straight, a completely unacceptable figure in modern Formula One. And the most serious thing is not the loss. It is that they did not know why it happened. This revelation completely changes the reading of what is happening in Miami, because it stops being an isolated weekend and becomes the consequence of a structural problem that Ferrari has had for several races. A problem that not only affects performance but the very understanding of the car. When sprint qualifying arrives, reality hits. Hamilton is far away, without rhythm, surpassed even within his own team. And there that phrase appears again that sums up everything. I expected more. It is not a superficial criticism, it is confirmation that internal expectations were completely misaligned with the reality on the track. And then we come to Sunday, the moment where everything ends up exploding. The race begins with chaos, with incidents that directly affect Hamilton, but the truly decisive thing comes later. Contact on the track, damage to the car, and the immediate consequence. A dramatic drop in performance. This is where Ferrari is exposed in the worst possible way. Because what should be a manageable loss turns into a total disaster. The car loses aerodynamic load and, with it, all ability to compete. This is not normal. Not in a team like Ferrari. Not in a car designed to fight for victories. And Hamilton knows it. That's why his statement doesn't sound like momentary frustration. It sounds like something much deeper. To the feeling that, even with all the work, with all the improvements, with all the accumulated experience, they are operating blindly. This is the real beginning of the problem. It is not the result, it is not the final position. It is the total loss of control over the behavior of the car. Because after the initial chaos of the race, after losing positions and suffering that contact that damaged the car, the logical thing would have been to expect a partial comeback, intelligent management of the pace, even a strategy that minimized damage. But what happens is exactly the opposite. The car becomes completely unstable, unpredictable, unable to maintain a competitive pace, and this is where the real core of the problem appears. Ferrari not only has a fragile car, it has a car that depends on perfect conditions to function. And this is devastating in Formula One because the races are never perfect. Aerodynamic damage, which in other equipment could represent a controllable loss, in the case of the SF26, causes a total collapse of performance. Hamilton begins to lose time lap after lap, without the possibility of defending himself, without tools to attack, completely exposed. And the most revealing thing is not the drop in positions. It is the total lack of response from the team. There is no adjustment that works, there is no strategic solution, there is no room for reaction. This brings us to a critical point in the analysis. Ferrari does not understand how its own car reacts when it leaves its ideal window. And that connects directly with what they had already suffered in previous races, where small changes in conditions or configuration generated massive performance losses that they could not explain. Hamilton, meanwhile, begins to experience one of the most uncomfortable situations of his career. Because it's not just that the car doesn't respond, it's that it can't adapt to it. Throughout his career, he has always been able to shape his style, find solutions, and squeeze even complicated cars. But there is no margin here. There is nothing to squeeze here. And this completely breaks one of the pillars of its success: trust. Because a driver like Hamilton needs to feel that there is logic behind the car's behavior, that every problem has an identifiable cause, that every adjustment has a predictable effect. But in Miami, all that disappears. Every turn is an unknown, every curve a doubt, every attempt a frustration. And while Ferrari watches, the rivals not only advance, they escape. The superiority of other teams is brutally exposed during the race, making it clear that we are not facing a small gap, but rather a real performance gap. And this is what makes Hamilton's subsequent statement so shocking, because it is not born just from the result. It is born from the helplessness of not understanding why they are so far away. At this point in the story, we are no longer talking about a bad update, nor an unfortunate weekend. We are talking about a car that has structural problems in its concept, in its aerodynamic behavior, and possibly in the integration of systems that directly affect its efficiency on the track. And the most worrying thing of all is that Ferrari arrived in Miami thinking that it had solved those problems. This is the real twist of Act 2, the realization that the problem is not only still there, but it's much bigger than they imagined. Hamilton feels it, lives it in every lap, and confirms it with his words. There are no answers. There is no clarity. There is no control. And when a team like Ferrari loses control of its own car, what comes next is never good. And then we reach the final point, the moment where everything stops being technical, strategic, or circumstantial, and becomes something much deeper. A total crisis of confidence within Ferrari, exposed without filters by Lewis Hamilton. Because the true consequence of everything that happened in Miami is not the final position, nor the points lost. It is what it leaves in the driver's mind. That feeling of not understanding, of not being able to explain, of not having control over what is happening. And in Formula One, when a driver loses that connection with the car, the problem is no longer just with the car. It is with the entire project. Hamilton's statement is not just another complaint. It is a direct alarm signal. When he says that the car just wasn't right, and that he has no idea what happened, he is breaking with the usual narrative of Formula One, where everything is usually measured, controlled, and explained. There is no explanation here. And that's what really shakes up the paddock. Because if Ferrari can't identify the problem, it can't fix it. And this is where Act 3 reveals its true weight, the impact on the future. Hamilton is not just any driver, he is not someone who settles or waits indefinitely. He came to Ferrari with a clear objective: fight for the championship, return the team to the top, build something winning. But what you are finding is a completely different scenario. An inconsistent car, a development that does not respond as it should, and, most worryingly, a team that seems to be one step behind its own problems. This begins to generate a silent but very dangerous tension. Because when a driver of his caliber starts to lose faith in the project, everything changes. It changes the way you drive, it changes your decision-making, it even changes your relationship with the team. And although this is not said publicly, it is felt in every statement, in every gesture, in every response. Miami 2026 can mark the beginning of something much bigger than a bad result. It may be the point where Hamilton begins to seriously question whether Ferrari can give him the car he needs. And that doubt in such a competitive championship is lethal. Because while other teams move forward with clarity, direction, and confidence, Ferrari seems trapped in a cycle of errors that it cannot decipher. And the most disturbing thing is that this type of crisis is not resolved overnight. They require time, understanding, profound changes, and Ferrari does not have that luxury if it wants to stay in the fight. With each race that passes without answers, the gap grows, the pressure increases, and the situation becomes more difficult to reverse. Therefore, Hamilton's statement after Miami is not only shocking, it is historic. because it doesn't just talk about a career, it talks about a breaking point. The moment when one of the best drivers in history openly admits that he does not understand what is happening. And when that happens, what is at stake is no longer just performance. And in the end, it all comes down to a single idea. What Lewis Hamilton said after the 2026 Miami GP was not simply a hot reaction, it was a confession that reveals a much more uncomfortable reality. Ferrari is lost in its own project. Because when you put all the pieces together, the inexplicable losses in performance, the disconnection between the simulator and the track, the extreme fragility of the car and the inability to react during the race, what appears is not a specific problem. It is a structure that is not working. And that's what makes this story so powerful. We are not talking about a frustrated pilot, we are talking about one of the greatest in history recognizing that he has no answers. And in a sport where every thousandth is controlled, where every detail is analyzed to the limit, not having answers is the worst thing that can happen to you. Miami was not the problem. Miami was the test. Proof that Ferrari still does not understand its car, that improvements do not guarantee solutions, and that the road to real competitiveness is much longer than they thought. And meanwhile, the clock is ticking, the rivals are advancing, and the pressure is increasing. The big question now is not what went wrong in this race. The big question is, how long can this situation last before everything completely explodes? Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.